Okay, so today we're going to go over Unit 3, Day 1 notes, which is solving literal equations. Now, let's start off by doing a problem that we actually recognize. So 2x divided by, or 2x equals 6. And our directions are to solve for x. So if you notice, you're multiplying the 2 and the x. So the opposite of multiplying is to divide. Therefore, I can be able to move the 2 to the other side. So x equals 3. Now remember, when you're solving an equation or you're solving for a specific variable, you're trying to make that variable be by itself on one side of the equal sign, okay? Now let's say we remove that 2 and we replace it with another variable. So now we have 8x equals 6. Now remember, 8 and x are being multiplied together. So the opposite of multiplying by a is to divide by a. Because remember, we're trying to solve for x, so we're trying to move the a to the other side. And the only way to do that is to do the opposite of the operation. So we're left with x equals 6 divided by a. Now obviously 6 divided by a can't be simplified, so that will be my final answer. Now, what if we have all letters? So our problem will be ax equals b. Now remember, we are solving for x. So that means x has to be by itself. So with that being said, to move the a to the other side, the opposite of multiplying by a is to divide by a. So x equals b divided by a. Okay. Now, let's look at problems number 2, or set number 2. Now, if you notice, we're doing x divided by 3 equals 5. You should recognize this type of problem because to be able to move this to the other side, you have to do times 3. So x equals 5 times 3 is 15. Okay? Now, what if we replace that 3 with the letter a? And remember, we're still solving for x, so that means I have to move the a to the other side. So the opposite of dividing by a is to multiply by a. So the a's go away, and I'm left with x equals 5 times a is just 5a. Okay, now what if we have all letters? It doesn't change anything. X is still being solved for, so that means I have to move the a. So the opposite of dividing by a is to multiply by a. So when I do that, the a's go away and I'm left with x equals b times a. It's just ba, or you can say x equals ab. Both of these are valid, okay? Those are valid answers, so just choose your favorite one and stick with it. Now, the next set of problems, if you notice, we are adding 4 and we're still solving for x. So that means the opposite of adding 4 is to subtract 4. So x equals 7 minus 4 is 3. Now, what if we didn't have a 4? What if we had a k, but we're still solving for x? Does it change anything? No. We still have to move the plus k to the other side, so that becomes a minus k. So x equals 7 minus k. Now, what if we have all numbers and we have all letters and no numbers, and we're still solving for x? It still doesn't change anything. I have to move the plus k to the other side because x has to be by itself. So the opposite of plus k is minus k. So that means I'm left with x equals f minus k. And there's my answer. Now, obviously you can rearrange these however you want. So like for example in this one, you could say x equals negative k plus f. And if you notice, they're still the same answer because the k is still negative and the f is still positive. So it doesn't matter which one you put first as long as the signs are still correct, okay? And same goes for the other one, okay? Now let's look at set 4. And now we're subtracting 3. And obviously we're still solving for x. So to be able to move the minus 3 to the other side, I have to do the opposite. So it becomes a plus 3. So that means x equals 4 plus 3 is 7. Now, same thing happens on the next problem. We're solving for x, but instead of the minus 3, we have a minus m. So to be able to move that minus m to the other side, I jailbreak by making it a plus m. So x equals 4 plus m. Now obviously you can write it as x equals m plus 4, and it's still the same result. Okay, you can just pick and choose your favorite. And the last one, same idea. We have to move the minus m, so that means it becomes a plus m. So x equals r plus m, or you could just say x equals m plus r. And those two are equivalent, so those two answers are correct. Okay, now let's flip to the next page of today's notes. Now, problem number 5. If you notice, this is a two-step equation you should recognize. So if we're solving for x, I have to move the number without the letter, okay, the constant first. So I'll jailbreak that to become a minus 6. So 2x equals 14 minus 6 gives me 8. And then I want to divide by 2. So x equals 4. Now this you should recognize. Basically it's the same thing. Well, let's say we don't have any numbers. We just have all letters. And we're still solving for x. Well, what's the first thing I need to do? I have to move the number that is not near the x, which is the plus b. So that becomes a minus b. So 8x equals c minus b. Now, next thing I need to do is I need to move the number that's right beside the a. So the opposite of multiplying by a is to divide by a. So x equals c minus b over a. Now, this could be a valid answer, or you can also break this up into two fractions. So it could be x equals c divided by a minus b divided by a. So both of these are valid answers. You just gotta pick and choose which one you like. Okay? Now, let's move on to problem number 6. First thing I need to do is move the minus 1, because remember we're solving for x, so that means I'm moving the constant first. So the opposite of minus 1 is a plus 1. So x divided by 4 equals 3. Now, if you notice, between the x and the 4, we're dividing. So to be able to move that 4, I have to multiply. So the opposite, so multiply by 4 to both sides, because it's the opposite of division. So x equals 12. Now you basically do the same thing for the problem we're about to do. This time we only have letters, which doesn't change anything. And we're still solving for x. So first thing I need to do is move the number that's not near the x. The letter that's not near the x. So that would be the minus b. So the opposite is to become plus b. So x divided by a equals c plus b. Now if you notice, I have x divided by a. To be able to move that a away from the x, I have to do the opposite of dividing by a, which is multiplying by a. So x equals. Now for this is something special. Now because we have an operation, we have two letters that are being added. I have to put parentheses because I'm saying that I'm multiplying the a with all those things. I'm not saying that I'm just doing a times b. I'm saying that I'm doing a times b and then a times c. Okay, so I'm multiplying that whole thing by a, so I need to put parentheses because that's what I'm saying. So you could really just move the a in front of the parentheses and say parentheses c plus b, and there's your valid answer. Now, of course, you could distribute the a to get you x equals ac plus ba, but either way, these two are valid answers. Just be able to recognize both of them. Okay? Okay, for example 7, you go ahead and try those two problems. If you have any questions with those problems, please do not hesitate to ask me. Let's go ahead and move on to the next problem, or to the next page. Now, let's start with example 1. Now it says solve 6 equals mx plus b for x. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to box in or highlight my x because that's what I'm looking for. Now, remember, the first thing I need to do is I need to move the letter that is not beside the x. So that will be the plus b. So that becomes a minus b. So 6 minus b equals mx. And then I need to move the letter that's right beside the x, which is the letter m. And if you notice, I'm multiplying, so the opposite is to divide. So x equals, you can write that big fraction, or you can say x equals 6 divided by m minus b divided by m. So basically break it up into 2 fractions. So those are your 2 options. You can either leave it like this as a big fraction, or leave it as a small, or as 2 fractions. Okay? Now, let's move on to number 2. For this one, they're asking me to solve for k. Okay? Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 1 in front of the k, because remember, if there's no number in front of a variable, it's implied to be a 1. Now, first thing I need to do is get rid of the divide by 6. The opposite of divide by 6 is multiply by 6. So that means I'm left with 6x equals 4 minus 1k. Now, next thing I need to do is I need to move the number that's away from the k, that's furthest away from the k, or is not beside the k, basically. So the opposite of a positive 4 is a minus 4. So 6x minus 4 equals negative 1k. Now the last thing you need to do is you need to move the number that's right beside the k, which in this case is negative 1k. So k equals, now of course it's a negative 1, so you can just simplify. So 6 divided by negative 1 is negative 6x. Negative 4 divided by negative 1 is positive 4. So there will be your result. Negative 6x plus 4 equals k. Okay, moving on. Number 3. Solve a equals p plus prt for t. So obviously we're solving for t. So the first thing I need to do is I need to move the p that does not have the letter t. So that will be this one. So the opposite of a positive t is a minus p. So that means I have a minus p equals prt. Now I need to be able to move the p and the r. And if you notice, the p and the r are all multiplying or being multiplied with the t. So really, if you wanted to, you could say divide by p and then divide by r as 2 different steps. But because everything's being multiplied, it's just easier to just move the p and the r. And because p and r are being multiplied, the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I'm just going to divide by pr. Instead of doing divide by p and then divide by r as 2 separate things, just focus on doing it in one easy step. So with that being said, the p's on this side go away, the r's go away, and I'm left with t equals a minus p divided by pr. Now obviously you can leave this as 1 fraction, or you can break it up into 2. So I'm going to break it up into 2 fractions. So a minus p divided by pr is my first result. Okay. And then I said I'm going to break this apart into 2 fractions. Now, I know that there's this problem, so go ahead and mark it out because I ran out of space, so I need that space to be able to continue with this problem. So anyways, I said that I was going to break this into 2 fractions. So it becomes a divided by pr minus p divided by pr. Okay, if you broke it into 2 fractions. So that will be your next valid answer. And of course, if you notice, you could easily make this into another answer. So you can basically simplify this to another answer. So that would be t equals, nothing on the first fraction can be simplified. So I will just leave it like it is. Bring down your minus. Now, what do you notice about the p's? these two p's will cancel each other out. So at the bottom of the fraction, I'm going to be left with r. But what about the top? There's nothing there. What do you think is left? Simply a 1. Okay? So if there's nothing there, it's implied to be a 1. Okay? So that will be another valid answer. This is if it's simplified. Okay? So just be able to recognize all three possible answers for that problem. Now, if you chose one of these three, then you are correct. It won't be counted wrong on my test. Now, number 5, if you notice, with number 5, we have parentheses. Now, you do have the option of distributing the 2. So you can do 2 times a and then 2 times negative c. For me, I only distribute a number or a letter with the parentheses when I'm solving an equation, or if there's 2 sets of parentheses that doesn't allow me to eliminate something. So for this one, there's only 1 set of parentheses. So the easier way to do this is just do the opposite of multiplying by 2, which is to divide by 2. So I'm just going to move the 2 to the other side. Now you could distribute if you wanted to, and that is your choice, okay? But for me, I'm not going to do that. But I will also show you how it looks if you multiply it out, okay? So first I'm going to solve it this way. So I'm left with a minus c equals 4a divided by 2 is 2a. Now you have to make a choice. Which a do you want to move over? Do you want to move this a over here or that a over there? So the easiest thing to do is move this a, and it becomes a minus a. So I'm left with negative c equals 2a minus a is just a, or 1a. And you are done, because that's your result, because you were solving for a. Okay. Now, what if you wanted to distribute? Well, you can do that if you wanted to, and I'm about to show you that it doesn't change your answer. Okay. So here's what happens if you distribute. 2 times a is 2a. 2 times negative c is negative 2c equals 4a. Now, I'm going to move the 2a to the other side so I can combine it, and that becomes minus 2a. So I'm left with negative 2c equals 2a. Then I want to divide by 2, okay, because a has to be by itself. So a equals negative 2c divided by 2 is negative 1c, which is still the same result. Okay, so just pick the one that you prefer and just go with it. Okay. Now, for this one, you could distribute or you could divide. It really doesn't matter. So for this one, I'm just going to divide by a to the other side because we're solving for y. So I'm left with cx minus d all over a equals x minus y. And then I'm going to jailbreak the x to become a minus x, and you're left with cx minus d divided by a subtracting by x equals negative y. Okay? Now, of course, there's problems here, so just mark them out because we're going to use that space. Now, we have cx minus d divided by a minus x equals negative y. That's what we said. But if you notice, we have a negative y, so that's technically a negative 1. So to be able to get rid of that, you got to divide by negative 1. Okay? And you're left with y equals, and I'm just going to leave this as a really big, complicated fraction. So it's going to be cx minus d divided by a minus x all over negative 1. Okay? And there's my answer for that one. Okay? Now, of course, if you have any questions about today's lesson, please do not hesitate to ask me in class tomorrow.